Welcome to the RNL Revolution Nothing Less Show. This is episode number 147 on May 11th, 2023. My name is Andy Zee. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California.
And my name is Sunsara Taylor. I'm the co-host of the Revolution Nothing Less Show.
This is a show about the world for a radically new world. A show about revolution and a show which applies the scientific method and approach developed by the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian to the major events in this country and the world, digging into and exposing their roots in the system we live under, capitalism, imperialism, and bringing to you not just the analysis of the problems humanity confronts, but the solution in a real revolution for the emancipation of humanity.
Bob Avakian is a serious revolutionary leader, and he is nothing like all the other leaders and politicians on the landscape today who are trying to get a place within this blood-soaked system. Bob Avakian roots himself in the scientific understanding that this system cannot be reformed and it has to be overthrown if we're going to put an end to all the exploitation and oppression that we see in this world around us. And he has put himself to developing the strategy, the scientific method and approach, and the vision of the new society, and a concrete blueprint for that new society to make this revolution real. And the revolution he is fighting for is not for revenge. It is for the emancipation of all of humanity.
Last week was a special episode of the RNL Revolution Nothing Less Show where we featured May 1st. And this May 1st, we introduced this proclamation, this broadsheet that's titled, "We are the RevComs, Revolutionary Communists. We are working for a real revolution and a whole new emancipating way of life." This is very important that this message get out to the people of the world. And this proclamation is going to frame today's show. It's going to be woven through what people talk about. I just want to show you two things that are in here that might bring to you some sense of what we're getting into. You know, every column begins with a bold-faced thing where it says, statement where it says, "To everyone who can't stand the way this world is, shaping up before us now are two fundamentally opposed futures, something terrible or something truly emancipating. And we have the method, the strategy, and the plan to make this real." And it says here that we are determined to seize on this rare time to develop the basis to actually make a revolution, to finally defeat the violent enforcers of this monstrous systems, to abolish the system with all its oppressive institutions and governing U.S. Constitution, a document written by and fundamentally serving the interests of the slave owners and capitalist exploiters from the founding of this country down to today, and then to establish a far better system based on the Constitution for a new socialist republic in North America. These points that I'm making that are concentrated in the full statement here are going to run through today's show. So I think we should get going with this, Sunsara. Why don't we tell people what we're going to do today?
All right, we're going to start today's show off with Lenny Wolff, a frequent contributor here, speaking about the horrific killing of Jordan Neely on a New York subway car. After that, we're going to hear from Bob Avakian digging into dictatorship and democracy. And it is not how people normally understand this, a very important segment. Atlas Winfrey on our team here will be getting into the crisis down at the U.S.-Mexico border with the expiring scheduled today of Title 42. He'll talk about what this means and really where the interests of humanity lie in relationship to this. And finally, we'll close out today's show with an update on the speaking tour that I've been on with Rafael Kadaris called Woke Lunacy versus Real Revolution. We'll share some excerpts of that, some of the experience so far. But most of all, we want to also highlight May 24th, we're taking this speech and this event to UCLA campus here in Los Angeles.
Well, because we have a lot to do on today's show, I want to go right to Lenny Wolff. Lenny's a frequent contributor to the show. He's an advocate for the new communism. He's a follower of Bob Avakian. And, he's going to tell you what he did. But this situation in New York was really, it's touched a very raw nerve. And it's been really necessary, and we were speaking about this morning, to go deeply into this and set some terms as to what's really concentrated here. But let's let Lenny speak about it, and then I'll come back and have a few words with Lenny when he gets done.
Neely was placed in a chokehold by a 24-year-old subway rider for nearly 15 minutes.
Look at the moment a former Marine put that man in a chokehold. The Marine was questioned by cops but then let go. Now tonight, we're waiting to find out if he'll face charges. Also tonight, we're getting a closer look at the man who died. His name, Jordan Neely. The Manhattan Borough President, Mark Levine, tweeting this video saying he often saw Neely perform on the subway, dancing and impersonating Michael Jackson.
It did not appear this man, who seemed to be suffering from some kind of mental disturbance, was seeking to assault anyone.
The incident putting a focus on mental health issues and homelessness in the subways.
There is growing outrage that the former Marine who was questioned has not been charged.
On the Uptown F train platform at Broadway Lafayette Street, a vigil for Jordan Neely.
Protesters once again gathering near the Broadway and Lafayette subway station, demanding accountability in the wake of Jordan Neely's death.
What did he do to deserve this? Well, listen to his last words. I don't have food. I don't have a drink. I'm fed up. I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison. I'm ready to die. For bitterly voicing his desperation, Jordan Neely was choked to death by a former Marine, just a white guy, a former Marine, somebody who was trained to kill by this system and use those skills on Jordan Neely in the subway. But there's a bigger criminal in this situation, and that criminal is this goddamn system.
People are anguishing over and wondering why the man who killed Jordan Neely has not yet been charged with a crime. In fact, people are not just wondering, they're protesting in the streets, including our comrades in New York City. But again, why? As I record this commentary over a week after the murder, have there been no charges against those who committed that murder? Now, to answer that, I'm going to talk about dictatorship. But let's not mystify that word. Dictatorship means the monopoly of the legitimate use of force by one group in society over the rest. Jordan Neely's murder is an example of class dictatorship in its peculiarly American form. Jordan Neely lost the only life he had to the everyday repression that goes on against those this system has in one way or another used once and thrown away or never had use for at all. Those who have been driven into the hard, almost impossible life on the streets by the heartless workings of this system, capitalism, imperialism, and who have in one way or another been broken by it. Usually this kind of brutality and murder is done by the official enforcers of this class dictatorship. But today, when the norms of how society have been ruled are breaking down, apparently all kinds of people now feel like they have the right to violently enforce their idea of order on other people. Why did Daniel Penny feel empowered to put another man in a chokehold and hold him in it for 15 minutes, even after that human being had gone limp? Why did the other subway riders go along with that? And why did people defend, or at least understand, his action on both social media as well as in the big media whether fascist or liberal. What this ends up justifying is not just state terror, but freelance piggery against oppressed people. A chokehold? Okay, so who's famous for chokeholds, especially in New York? The police, who murdered Eric Garner in 2014 for the horrible crime of selling loose cigarettes. And who does not know what chokeholds can do, especially after the murder of George Floyd? But a huge section of people, and not all of them outright fascists, are apparently okay with this. After all, we must have order, says Eric, the Black Giuliani, Adams, as he issues yet more edicts to forcibly remove homeless people from public life and to incarcerate them either in the insane asylum prisons of New York City or the prison-like psychiatric institutions upstate. And let's reverse this just for a minute. Is there anywhere in America in which you can imagine a black man putting a white homeless man in a chokehold and killing him, having the whole thing recorded on video, and not even getting charged? Actually, he'd be lucky if he didn't get killed himself. That's because class dictatorship in America has always been intricately linked with the oppression of whole peoples, of black people, Latinos, Native Americans, and others. And Jordan Neely is one more tragic example of that. In a deep sense, Daniel Penny was not acting alone. He was acting as he had been trained to act by this system, both through his time in the Marines and his time just growing up and being conditioned by the workings and the assumptions of this system. And those applauding him or justifying him or excusing him are acting as they have been conditioned to think and act by this system. But what about the braggery of this system about, okay, life can be rough in America, but in the end, every individual can flourish? Really? Which individuals? And on what basis? Jordan Neely is someone who is both very talented and troubled at the same time. And the best your system can do for him is to break him down and put him on the streets and finally kill him? And then not even a semblance of justice? Oh, but Jordan Neely had a record of 40 arrests. And how many of those were for the crimes of the homeless? But the law under our system treats everyone equally. So both Jordan Neely and Bill Gates are equally forbidden from performing on the trains. Both Jordan Neely and Elon Musk are equally forbidden from squeegeeing windshields to make enough to eat a little bit of breakfast. Both Jordan Neely and Eric Jr. or Ivanka Trump will be arrested or maybe even killed if they have a mental breakdown in public. Really? Think about it for 1 minute. People talk about the contradiction between the immense wealth and luxury in New York City and the scourge of homelessness. But every contradiction contains both a connection as well as a potential clash. The illusion of individual freedom is the veil for and coexists with class oppression and misery. Right after I finished this piece, I saw an article entitled, "How the System Failed Jordan Neely." And what it seemed to be talking about was how the mental health system didn't reach him in time. But the mental health system is just a very, very subordinate cog in the larger system, the real system, the capitalist imperialist system that determines all the rest. As long as you accept the terms of that system and limit your imagination to what you think might be possible within what capitalism, imperialism requires to keep going every day, you won't be able to even begin to ask the right questions. You won't be able to really dig into the roots of why homelessness, along with addiction, suicide, and mental health issues more generally, are exploding in this society. Or to figure out why the only things you notice being done about any of those is the explosion of the for-profit assembly line mental health services that advertise nonstop on cable to go along with the punitive policing of the Democratic Party pigs like the one who runs New York City, Eric the Black Giuliani Adams. But once you free your mind from the confines of what is possible in this capitalist imperialist system, once you truly understand the roots of these exploding crises in that system, then you can begin to clear your head and clear your eyes. You can begin to see that if we made a revolution, a real revolution, we could proceed from human beings as the most important, the most creative, and the most potentially powerful productive force. With all the heart and brain power that is now suppressed, distorted, and mangled by the dog-eat-dog relations that people must enter into or live with every day just to survive. Then and only then would the horizons of the truly possible open up. And then and only then would you fully see the madness of how we are forced to live. In thinking about the killing of Jordan Neely and about the response of way too much of the public, as well as the nature of this system, I went back to read what the revolutionary leader and the author of the New Communism, Bob Avakian, said in reference to the police murder of Tyisha Miller. Tyisha Miller was a young black woman who passed out in her car as a result of a seizure and was shot 11 times by police. BA said, if you can't handle this situation differently than this, then get the fuck out of the way. Not only out of the way of this situation, but get off the earth. Get out of the way of the masses of people. Because we could have handled this situation any number of ways that would have resulted in a much better outcome. The heartless murder of Jordan Neely is one more evidence of a time in which you and all of us are being forced to confront the brutal, vengeful, mad reality of today, where things are going, and whether anything can be done about it. Well, something can be done. We can make revolution. We have the sweeping vision, the firm foundation, and the concrete blueprint for the new society that could enable people to flourish together in the Constitution for the new Socialist Republic in North America, written by Bob Avakian. We have the strategy to make that revolution, and not in the far-off future, but in these times. A revolution that can put in place the economic system, the political structures, and the social relations between people to figure out new approaches to solve the problems that confound people under this system. And we have the leadership for that in Bob Avakian and the RevComs, the revolutionary communists. This is what you need to be part of.
Lenny, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. As you know, I got up early this morning and I was reading this piece by Bob Avakian, An Exploiter's Vision of Freedom, about the U.S. Constitution, and it goes very deeply. It's up on our website now, and I really want everybody to read this because it goes very deeply into what's behind those words of freedom, we the people, and what really is underneath it, the system and the forms of class oppression. And I wanted to, I sent you a couple of thoughts on it. You came back to me and said, why don't you make that into a piece? And that's what we tried to do.
It made a big difference that you that you pulled the lens back, because there's so much confusion around this murder and what's really involved in it. And this is really going to help people do that. And I also appreciate that you directed people to you're just mentioning that piece, to get into Bob Avakian, to look at the Constitution for the new Socialist Republic in North America, then to watch this show. And what else do people need to be doing?
Well, I think there's two answers to that. In reference to these kinds of things, where oppressors in or out of uniform are doing things to the people that are clearly unjust and illegal, we have got to develop the capability to do what is said in Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating. And I want to read this. He says, as the revolution grows, there is plenty that needs to be done, and urgently, which requires real boldness and heart to stand up against the fascists and any other oppressive force in their moves to threaten and intimidate, brutalize, and even murder people. Let me make clear that I am not calling for launching unprovoked and unjustified attacks on anybody, but there is a right and a need, and there is the responsibility to defend people who are oppressed and brutalized under this system, and those who represent and stand for what is right and are being attacked because of that. And I think this kind of force, which does require a great deal of forethought and preparation to really put into practice, if it is part of a larger movement for revolution, which has many facets, I think can be a major part of the roadmap that can really fundamentally, that can put revolution on the map.
And I think it's important, Lenny, that people learn what that roadmap is, the full roadmap. And you can do that in the work that by Bob Avakian, Something Terrible or Something Truly Emancipating, that you can find right at the top of our website, revcom.us. And so I want to thank you for the commentary and for this brief follow-up. And let's go. Let's put revolution on the map.
Very much.
So we just heard Lenny Wolff talk about the horrific killing of Jordan Neely in New York City on the subways. And Lenny spoke about dictatorship and democracy. And so from the interview we did with Bob Avakian, he spoke about the question of dictatorship under this system and the dictatorship under a new revolutionary society, and democracy in both contexts. And this excerpt will give you a larger materialist view of these questions of democracy and dictatorship. So let's watch. And you've made a couple of very provocative statements that have to do with the nature of this radically different state power. One, you wrote that not all dictatorships are bad. And another time you said democracy, that's just another word for dictatorship. So these are highly controversial and provocative statements, particularly in this brainwashed society, as to what the nature of what democracy actually means and what it is. So I thought it'd be important to get into why it is necessary to be straight up about this for humanity to get free.
Well, look, once again, it depends on what the content of the dictatorship is. But let's back up a step. First of all, we have to define what is a dictatorship. A dictatorship is not, Nikita Khrushchev pounding his shoe on the table in the UN and saying, we will bury you. That's not a dictatorship. A dictatorship, imagine just one person trying to dictate to all of society with no institutions to back it up and no underlying relations that that's based on. It would be impossible. Just think about it. A dictatorship is dictatorship by a class. It's a dictatorship based on an underlying system, either a capitalist imperialist system of exploitation, or on the other hand, a radically different dictatorship of the socialist system, which is moving to uproot all exploitation and oppression. So they're qualitatively different. I know when we went out to the law school, I think at UCLA, and we, popularized this article that you're referring to, which made this point about what a dictatorship actually is. It's the rule of a class, not of an individual or a small clique of people. And, it rests on a definite underlying system of social and most fundamentally, economic relations. So we went there, and one of these law students said, well, you're redefining the definition of what a dictatorship is. Yes, because we're bringing forward the scientific explanation of what a dictatorship is and redefining the unscientific notion that a dictatorship is or could be exercised by just one person or a small group of people with no understanding of the underlying system that they're trying to enforce and what relations that system embodies. So that's the first thing you have to understand. What is a dictatorship? So, and the dictatorship of the proletariat, the exploited class, that's another way of saying socialist state power. Mm-hmm. Let's demystify. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about state power to enforce the transformations, to be the backing, the institutionalized backing for the transformations that the socialist revolution is all about. Uprooting the oppression of women, uprooting all gender oppression, uprooting the exploitation of people, where some people make money by forcing other people to work for them, uprooting all the relations among different races and nationalities that are oppressive, that embodies the supremacy of one group over another, and so on and so on. This is what the socialist state power, the dictatorship of the proletariat, is all about. Now, is there democracy under this dictatorship? Yes, there's democracy in a way that is unimaginable under the current capitalist imperialist system, which is the rule of exploiters. There's the involvement, the increasing involvement, wave after wave, of broad masses of people in actually determining the direction of society on the basis of leadership, which, leads them to transform the oppressive relations that they rose up against to make revolution in the first place. So yes, you need leadership, but there is active involvement. And yes, as I said, there's a lot of dissent, ferment, in the arts, and culture generally. For example, in the Constitution for the New Socialist Republic in North America, it makes the point. It talks about the principle, which is the principle that guides this whole Constitution, and the dictatorship of the proletariat, the socialist state power that it envisions and speaks to, which is solid core with a lot of elasticity based on the solid core. So in the realm of education, for example, it says that the solid core of the educational system in this new social society will be the application of dialectical materialism, the scientific approach to understanding material reality both in nature and in society. It says that will be the solid core, but there will also be the elasticity in the form of allowance for other and opposing viewpoints to be presented in the context of the educational system, and so throughout society, in the realm of culture, in the realm of the media, and so on. This is how it is envisioned. This is how, what we've come to understand needs to be applied in terms of actually exercising socialist state power, the dictatorship of the proletariat, in a way that increasingly involves the conscious revolutionary activity of the masses of people, and they're thrashing out different ideas and programs and where they'll lead in a living way. So, now to talk about democracy on the other hand, under this system, Mao said, Mao said, sounds religious. But anyway, Mao did say, and he was right. So that's the important point, that democracy is part of the superstructure. What do we mean by that? Well, like you have a house that has a foundation, the walls and the roof are the superstructure over the foundation. So in society, the foundation is the economic system, and the political institutions and processes and the culture are the superstructure that arises on that and then in turn reflects and reinforces it. So the point is that in the superstructure, democracy is part of that superstructure. And what does that mean? It means that the superstructure, again, arises on the basis of and in turn reinforces the underlying foundation, the economic system that is the foundation for the society. So when you have a capitalist economic foundation based on exploitation, the superstructure, in order for the society to function, has to be an expression of and reinforce that underlying system of exploitation. And if it doesn't, then the society will just come completely unraveled and be torn apart. And I've used the example many times, and I think it's a good example, of the right to eat. You know, the laws as well as the politics are part of the superstructure. So let's say you had a law in capitalist society that said people have a right to eat, and let's expand it more broadly. People have a right to all the basic necessities of life. I mean, after all, what can be more fundamental? That you have to, you know, that you can have the basic necessities of life, or that you're denied the basic necessities of life. So let's say you passed a law. Some well-meaning social democrats got in, and they said, let's pass a law that says that everyone has the right to eat. All right, well now that's a right enshrined in law. So hungry masses who don't have the money to pay for, you know, forget about Whole Foods, you know, just, you know, what is it, Ralph's Market, you know, from the Big Lebowski, right? Anyway, let's say they go into Ralph's Market, you know, and they go up to the cashier and they got all this food, and the cashier says that'll be $173.28. And they say, I'm sorry, I only have $16. Well, then you have to put some food back. No, I don't, because I have a right to eat. It's written into the law. Now imagine what would happen then. The whole economy would very quickly fall apart, because it takes money to produce all this stuff that's sold in the store. You know, the store has to have a building. It has to have maintenance. It has to pay employees, plus all the other people that had to be paid, and all the structures that had to exist, and the machinery that had to be used to produce the food. And first of all, the farm workers to get it out of the ground and so on, and to plant it. All that is expenses that went into producing all this food. So if people just walk in and say, I have a right enshrined in law, you can't stop me, I'm going to take anything I need out of this store as long as I say it's for my basic needs, you could see how the whole society would come completely unraveled. So, you know, this is one illustration of how the superstructure of politics and laws and so on has to reflect the underlying system. The democracy we have under this system is the democracy of the capitalist system of exploitation. It means that you can exercise rights as long as they stay within the framework of the capitalist system of exploitation.
For decades, the U.S.-Mexico border area has been a zone of death, pain, and suffering inflicted by U.S. imperialism upon tens of millions of migrants. People have died trying to reach it.
Ahora lo que me queda es ir a una caja de madera a darle su último adiós.
People have died trying to cross it. People have died if they get across, and then are hunted like animals over deserts, mountains, and raging streams, in searing heat or freezing cold. People have been run over by trucks on lonely rural blacktops. The corpses of people bitten by rattlesnakes have been left to rot, miles from help. Millions have been expelled or deported, back to the US-created poverty and violence they are trying to escape. The stories, songs, and poems of their anguish could fill volumes. These are not random incidents. They are a direct result of the relentless exploitation enforced by brutal repression the U.S. has inflicted on the peoples and countries of this hemisphere for over a century. They are a direct consequence of the policies and actions taken by the ruling class of this country, both Democrats and Republicans. And now, a massive leap in that repression will quite possibly erupt very soon. On May 11th, Title 42 expires.
Title 42 is part of the U.S. legal code dealing with public health. During the height of the COVID-19 crisis, the Trump-Pence fascist regime used it to expel hundreds of thousands of people seeking refuge in the U.S., denying them the international human right to apply for asylum. The Biden administration also took up use of Title 42 and used it to expel about 2.4 million people, far surpassing the fascist Trump. But now, with Title 42 coming to an end, leaders of both the Democrats and the Republic-Fascists and the major news media have been warning of a surge of immigrants at the border when Title 42 expires.
A rush toward the southern border.
Title 42 set to expire on Thursday. Authorities are now bracing for up to 10,000 migrants a day.
One of the most consequential immigration policies in U.S. history.
As the U.S. prepares for a surge in migrants.
Surge of migrants.
Surge in migrants.
Migrant surge.
This is a crisis for this system. This system cannot absorb all these immigrants and the millions more coming behind them into the already strained economy, with millions of people already being forced to scramble for the same social services, jobs, and resources. It cannot absorb the enormous numbers of people coming without further inflaming the fanatically racist fascists in society and in the government. These are enormous numbers of people who this system has no future for except death and misery.
Porque crucé, porque quiero, mis hijas corren peligro en Colombia y nos vinimos para acá para que ustedes nos ayuden y nos puedan darles un mejor futuro, que no quiero que mis hijas desaparezcan.
And over in Mexico is very dangerous because I have to pay the cartels when I'm traveling a lot of money. I'm just trying to seek a better life. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a violent person.
Enormous numbers of the most vulnerable people, men, women, and children, are being talked about as if they are an invading army by the very people who fucked up their countries with actual invading armies. U.S. troops have invaded Latin America more than 70 times, leaving occupying armies for months, years, and in some cases, decades. If you count all U.S. interventions in Latin America, including things like CIA-orchestrated coups, the number is over 100. And then these people who carry out brutal invasions and occupations have the gall to get up on television and talk about how wrong it is to cross a border illegally. On top of all this, then when thousands of people flee their homelands, human beings who ask for nothing more than a chance to breathe, a chance to live, a chance to survive, instead of welcoming them, instead of offering them refuge, the Biden administration has been systematically putting in place policies which make asylum essentially impossible for most people to get, all while rapidly preparing a surge of their own.
The Biden administration formally proposed barring asylum seekers at the southern border unless they first ask for asylum in a country they passed through. It's something the Trump administration tried but was blocked in court.
New restrictions for asylum, requiring asylum seekers to have first been denied asylum in another country and to have obtained an appointment at a port of entry using a government app, steps that advocates say violate U.S. law.
This policy is confusing because it is designed to confuse and keep out asylum seekers.
The Biden administration says they will deal with an expected surge towards the border with its own surge of personnel and resources. If you're someone with a heart, you might be thinking, that sounds nice. I'm sure he's sending food and medicine, doctors and social workers. But no, The surge Biden is talking about is a surge of thousands of troops from the U.S. military to assist the Border Patrol so its notoriously racist and brutal agents can be freed up to systematically arrest, detain, incarcerate, and deport massive numbers of asylum-seeking migrants.
President Biden has approved sending 1,500 troops to the border. The soldiers will be from active duty Army units.
It's like a war zone. Troops marching to the border to stop migrants from crossing.
We are prepared to be here indefinitely.
Sending them back to go die in hellhole conditions that the U.S. has created in their countries.
There's 5 here with 2 children. All of them are from Mexico. There's a good chance that this group right here will quickly get processed and will be back in Mexico by the end of the day.
Biden insists he isn't like Trump. He isn't saying you can't apply for asylum. He's just making it nearly impossible to get it, throwing all kinds of perilous hoops in the way and making it extremely difficult, and then smashing and repressing all the people who try to get in anyway. A bullshit facade of compassion and legality is what Biden and the Democrats think distinguishes them from the open racism, hatred of foreigners, and unbridled brutality of Trump and the Republifascists. Even with Biden preparing and initiating intense new levels of repression against what could be unprecedentedly large numbers of migrants trying to enter the U.S., to the Republifascists, this isn't nearly harsh enough. These fascists see the growing diversity of this country and the loss of this country's white Christian identity as an existential threat to this country's future. Compared to what they want to do, these fascists call what Biden is doing an open borders policy.
He has failed America with his open border policy.
All of this is a byproduct of Biden's open border policies.
But whether this country's war on immigrants is waged with build the wall, white supremacist fascism, or with Biden's heightened repression with a compassionate facade, this system has no answer other than more horror, more oppression, more misery, and more suffering. This crisis and the anguish it perpetuates is caused and driven by the global functioning of capitalism imperialism, especially U.S. imperialism. A system that has impoverished tens of millions of people across Mexico, Central, and South America. It has poisoned the earth and water, made agriculture more difficult or even impossible in some rural areas, and supported death squad governments that have murdered, brutalized, and raped countless people, all as part of building up the riches and power of the good old USA. It's this system and its enforcers who are the real criminals, the real monsters, and the real mass murderers, and they have no right to deny immigrants the right to asylum. They have no right to demonize and dehumanize immigrants. They have no right to invade, bomb, oppress, and exploit people all over the world. They have no right to condemn millions to poverty, misery, death, and destruction. That the rulers can do all these things, and this is deemed legitimate under their system and its constitution, just drives home that these imperialists have no right to rule. We need to be waking up and mobilizing all those who are sick and tired of seeing so many people being treated as less than human, to be part of standing up and opposing this shit now. No human being is illegal. These are our brothers and sisters. They are human beings, and no one should accept this as the new normal. And we need to be doing this as part of getting organized for an actual revolution to overthrow these imperialists and the system they enforce. It doesn't have to be this way. As the broadsheet, we are the RevComs states. Bob Avakian has expressed this profound reality. We can no longer afford to allow these imperialists to continue to dominate the world and determine the destiny of humanity. And it is a scientific fact that humanity does not have to live this way. a whole different way to organize society, a whole better world is possible. Down with the Biden-Trump persecution of immigrants. No human being is illegal. We don't have an immigration problem. We have an imperialism problem. This system must go. Now's the time to get organized for an actual revolution.
On today's show, you've heard about the brutal lynching of Jordan Neely on the subway in New York and the whole system that empowered this white ex-Marine to snuff out the life of a homeless black man. You've heard about the U.S. government under Joe Biden sending the military to the border to hunt down migrants who made a desperate journey to come here because this country has fucked up Latin America so bad that people can't even survive in their own homelands. This is just a small sample of the state of the world, torn apart and ravaged by this system of capitalism imperialism, a system which grinds up the lives and suffocates the potential of billions of people on this planet. College campuses should be hotbeds of resistance and revolution, centers of intellectual ferment where students are searching out answers to the big problems facing humanity. But what do we have instead? Way too many college students obsessing over identity, inclusion, safe spaces, and canceling people out. This is what we're setting out to radically change with a speaking tour that Sunsara Taylor and I are on. You've been giving a very powerful speech. We've gone to Berkeley, UC San Diego, and pretty soon at UCLA.
That's right. The speech is called, as we've said, Woke Lunacy versus Real Revolution. And the situation that you described, Rafael, with students caught up canceling each other, hiding from the larger world and not thinking about it the way they need to be. All this woke business is not just a dead end. It is doing tremendous harm. And this is why we've been taking it on. And so far, up in Berkeley, down in San Diego, and soon here at UCLA, we've been opening this up. It's been very controversial, but it's been very uplifting and controversial in a good way. And we've actually lifted some of these young people, the student sites, to a real revolution. We want to share some of what we got into, 2 clips that we want to share from our experience in San Diego. So to set up the first one, I want to read a quote from Bob Avakian that's on the flyer that we've been promoting. It says, "Masses of people are being brutalized and savaged. The world is burning, literally as well as figuratively. And you are preoccupied with changing the faces of those who preside over these horrors and spitting on people if they don't use the nouns and pronouns that you approve of, or in some other way violate the constantly mutating standards of wokeness." And this is a quote directed at woke folk. And so this is, there's other things on this flyer, but this quote has come up and been a point of controversy, both in building for the events and in the events themselves. And we want to show a segment where somebody, actually a number of students in the audience in San Diego, objected to the way he talked about the obsession with pronouns and spitting on people who use the wrong pronouns. And they also brought up an article from Bob Avakian called Pronouns and Starving Children, which we were distributing. So you'll hear both those things referenced in this clip.
All right, let's watch.
Study has shown that using the preferred pronouns of trans people, and especially trans youth, improves their mental health and prevents suicides. So following that up, I guess I'm wondering why I'm seeing kind of reactionary rhetoric against preferred pronouns. This is, I guess, a very disingenuous argument because it is possible to both care about children starving in the third world and also care about trans people.
I kind of raise an eyebrow at word choices like lunacy and real revolution ostensibly versus fake revolution. Do we believe in this, the others do not, etc. And it kind of perturbs me.
Okay.
Because on the whole, maybe this is just me, but when it comes to the things that I agree with you with, namely things like cancel culture being a farce, the things that I agree with you with, my response is, well, no shit. And the things that I disagree with you with, I'm left feeling like you're overgeneralizing things.
The name of the article that's in that pamphlet is Pronouns and Starving Children. And he starts out the article by pulling the lens back to the big picture in the world. And he says, since World War II, just think about this statistic, 250 million children, if I'm getting the statistic right, 250 million children have died of starvation and preventable disease because of capitalism. You know, because we live in a system where food and medicine are not produced to meet social need, they're produced as commodities to be bought and sold for a profit. No other reason than that. You know, if someone lined up 250 million children up with...
It's 350.
350. If someone lined up 50 children up against a wall and shot them one by one in front of you, everyone would say, what a fucking barbaric system. Like, let's get together and stop whoever's doing that from doing it. But literally, you know, millions of children every year are dying of starvation and preventable disease for no other reason than the fact that the system is dominated by a tiny class of capitalists and enforced by police and military. You know, and we have the power to actually do something about that. But what is going on college campuses and beyond is people are focused on pronouns. People are focused on
trans people though.
Look,
I mean, how can you like?
This is true actually, and he makes the point. We'll get to you. 1 second. We'll get to you. He makes the point. I'm not here to argue about what pronouns people use. And in the quote that Sunsara read earlier, Bob Avakian made very clear that the attacks on trans people should be like vigorously fought. But look, all the obsession with identity, this is what we're talking about. We're not just talking about, the phenomenon here is not just people wanting to use their preferred pronoun. I'll use whatever pronoun people want us to use. It is horrific, the suicide statistics among trans, something like 50%.
There's no argument made against using preferred pronouns. There's an argument. Hold on. No.
That's a Mon Bailey.
No, it's not. There's an argument over the obsession with it, over the canceling of people, and you better believe people are being spit on for making mistakes, and people are posturing like that's doing a damn thing to change the world. You are completely right that the culture and the acceptance of trans youth and trans people overall has everything to do with their mental health, but let's be real. If we want to end this horror for trans people, for queer youth and queer people as a whole, for women, for the 8 billion people on this planet who won't have a sustainable planet, we need to overthrow the system. And yes, people can do both. Pay attention to pronouns and to the 350 million starving children. Yes, they can. But let's be honest. Where do you see anything, and I have to say, to your idea that, revolution, the things I agree with, no shit. Where do you see anybody in this country fighting to bring this system down? To overthrow it so we don't have 350 more children starved to death and the planet set on fire. Where do you see that happening? I do not see people doing both. If we did, there wouldn't be that article. What you see instead is people thinking they are doing something, but it's precisely the cancel culture, the teardown culture, the you messed up an identity, the you be quiet and follow me because of my oppressed identity. That is not changing the world, that's playing around. And there is no argument.
A Band-Aid compared to really healing.
Yeah, it's true, and there is no argument. I will say, you're saying it's disingenuous. It's disingenuous to ascribe an argument. Look, there are people, we all know it's true, there are people who get out there and make a point of refusing to use people's preferred pronouns. And it's fucked up. And you are right to call that kind of thing out, but it's disingenuous to say that's what's being done in this piece. There's something being done precisely to get under people's skin, and I'm glad it got under your skin in a good way, and I hope you think about it and others do too, to say, where are we focused? That's where he began. What is the big picture? Where are we focused?
So as you can see, this was a very exciting and lively discussion in the question and answer. We got all kinds of questions from the students. And, you know, one big theme that came out was the question of revolution. What is a real revolution? Why is it necessary? And why are we saying that this is a rare time when revolution is even more possible? So we're going to play a short clip from Sunsara Taylor addressing exactly these questions.
To overthrow this system with what its militaries and occupations and terror and torture around the world, you actually have to bring that down. There's no other way. So to do that, and this gets to the brother who asked the question about why is revolution more possible now. Rafael was talking about a big part of this. I just want to underscore it because we're living in a rare time. person who left early about we're going, could be the Holocaust, the Holocaust in that exact form. History doesn't repeat itself, but we are heading towards something horrific. The Christian fascists who took over the Supreme Court, they're not stopping. They are really going for Handmaid's Tale. It's going to be a nightmare. The planet is burning up. The horrors of what climate destruction has already done to Latin America and other countries where people are fleeing, and then the nightmare being unleashed by Border Patrol, by all over the world, the camps people are piling up in. The nightmare that is happening for humanity on a global scale that most people are not looking at and thinking about in this country. We are living in a time when the ways that people have been accustomed, you said the system's gone on for a long time, people have been accustomed to accept this system as legitimate because it's played by certain rules. There's been peaceful transfer of power. Maybe we don't like certain things, but at least we have a say-so, and at least we have peaceful transfer of power. Well, that's being blown up. Look what happened in Tennessee. This is happening. It's escalating by the week. Tennessee, students get massacred. They do a walkout. 2 junior state representatives stand with them, 3 actually. 2 of them are young and black, and the fascist majority of the Republican State House says, doesn't matter that you were elected, you are no longer representatives.
Montana, too.
Yeah.
Then they did it, exactly, I was going to go there next. Then they did it last week. Fascists looked at it, ooh, new play. We're going to put that in our playbook. They passed a fascist trans law there, and the trans representative, look, I don't think you can solve this with reforms and by entering this system, but this trans representative got up and said, when you go home and pray tonight after passing this law, I hope when you look at your hands, you see the blood of trans youth on them. Because you're absolutely right, the death rates, the suicide rates, this is what's gonna happen. They said, oh, out with you. This is not a democracy. And look, he's right, the democracy was always a cover for a class dictatorship. But right now, the ways that people have been conditioned to accept this system are being ripped up. And what it is mainly leading to is the fascists are on a tear, and people in this country with their American privilege and their comfort are largely retreating inward to themselves. They're hiding from this reality. And you have a situation where the fascists are on the march, and the decent people have their heads up their fucking asses and are laying down for this. And why are we taking on woke, and why are we challenging people? Because decent people are playing around canceling each other over petty shit rather than facing this real horror and standing up to it. But we're in a time when, because the norms are being ripped open, there are big questions being forced open that if we got serious, if we got organized, if we spread this We Are the RevComs mission, read it. This is what we're doing. We're spreading it to millions right now. We need to be able to work together as you're learning about it. Get this out there. Let them know there's a different way we could be, and work together, debate it. We could be reaching millions in a time like this. And the other thing that makes it a rare time, that actually speaks to why a revolution, how it could be made in a way that is not normally possible, is that the divisions among the rulers go down through every part of society, including among the population and also within the institutions of the state, including their armed forces and their institutions of repression. They're not all, half of them for revolution and half of them for fascism. But when you have fascist laws and you have half your military, or 80% of it is people from among the oppressed who are being called out. Look, there was a little window. I'm going to give 2 examples, then we're going to go somebody who didn't. Yeah, you hadn't spoken yet. During 2020, it's very interesting, and this is an indication of what makes this a unique time. When the National Guard was called out to Washington, D.C., and the U.S. military with the Black Hawk helicopters in D.C. so Trump could walk across and pose in front of the church, a lot of those National Guard are black, Latino. A lot of the black guardsmen were ashamed to tell their families what they were doing, that they were there to police the Black Lives Matter protests. And you see how even their own armed forces, during Vietnam, the armed forces split apart. During the Vietnam War, after they were getting their asses kicked, it was an unjust war, huge numbers of people. There's a film, Sir No Sir, about the rebellion within the military. They couldn't deploy their military because the Black Panther Party leaders, because other anti-war leaders were more popular than the president among the military. And so there were all kinds of units that wouldn't go out and fight anymore. And they couldn't deploy them. You can have, in a time like this when the norms are being ripped up, you actually have splits in their institutions. You saw dimensions of this with the overturning of Roe as well. U.S. veterans, female veterans, who said, I fought for this country, I served this country. They came back and they burned their uniforms when that right got taken away. They said, what did I fight for? I'm treated as a second-class citizen. What is this country? You start to see the contours of how you could actually break apart and weaken their. You still are going to have a fight. They're still going to be powerful, but they're less powerful. They're more prone to being split apart, and there's more basis to win people among the revolutionaries among the people. And if you waste a time like this, we are headed towards something horrific when we could actually bring about something truly emancipating, which is why we're fighting with people to think of the big picture. Think of the 300 million children around the world. Think about the world future for the planet. And let's seize this time. All right, so this speaking tour, Woke Lunacy versus Real Revolution, is off to a very good start. And we're just starting to crack open the straitjacket of this woke indoctrination on these students and young people. And it's showing some of the potential, but this needs to go much higher and become something that spreads across this country and recruiting students into this revolution. So we're taking this again, May 24th at UCLA. If you're in the area, you have to be there and bring people and join in the campaign to bring others. And wherever you are across this country, reach out to us. Book this tour on your campus in the fall. Reach out now. Start working with this effort. We have to bring this new generation into this revolution. And it's urgent, and this is a key part of that.
So, Sunsara, that brings us to the end of this, the 147th episode of the RNL Show on May 11th, 2023.
That's right. So we're getting out in the world. I've been on this speaking tour. You are getting ready to speak in New York City at Revolution Books up in Harlem. If you're in the area, you don't want to miss it.
That's Tuesday night. It's going to be a question and answer on this.
So we are the RevComs.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing Tuesday night at Revolution Books. And then while we're on the topic of what we're doing...
Well, while I'm holding this up, if you don't have this, you got to get your hands on it and you got to spread it. This is a tool, a guide for us, all of us who want to make revolution, and a tool for spreading and organizing many others into this movement right now. Now you can go ahead.
Okay, well, you announced before that you are going to be speaking at UCLA on the 24th of May.
That's right.
And because of that, not next week, but the week after, our show is going to premiere on Friday night, the 26th, to allow for us to include some of your presentation at UCLA on the show, and also so that everybody, all of our watchers, all of our fans, all of us can go to hear you speak on Wednesday night when we record this program.
All right, so that's going to be our schedule 2 weeks from now. But next week, we're back at our regular time, which you were very good at announcing.
I'm very good at that time. It's something I can actually do well, that we're going to be on next Thursday night right here at RevComs on YouTube. And that's at 5 o'clock Pacific time, 7 o'clock Central time, 8 o'clock New York time. And it is important for you that if you subscribe to the channel, you can get updates, because sometimes in the uploading of the episode, it gets delayed by 10 or 15 minutes, and you will find out and not be staring nervously at your TV or your computer. You'll know that, oh, it's coming on in 10 minutes, just enough time to get a snack. Okay, but this is a really important show that we're going to be having next week, and this one, and as I said earlier today, watch last week's show again. So for the rest of the crew, I want to say good night.
Yeah, good night. We'll see you next week.
All right.